You're watching Silver News Daily. Subscribe for more.
It's a planned demolition. If you have one central authority, which basically do with the Federal Reserve System, and almost all banks are member banks, and they say, well, we don't need these banks, or these banks that failed or are not capitalizing enough, and they merge, two medium-sized banks and a bigger bank. It's all about control. It's about control of the money. And if you have fewer banks to control, it's easier. And so that really is part of the goal, rather than, it's a failure. No, it's actually...
What if I told you that $500 silver isn't just a crazy forecast? It's the end game of a system designed to fail. According to silver expert David Morgan, we're not witnessing a financial collapse. We're watching a controlled demolition. Bank failures, fiat destruction, central bank digital currencies, AI control grids. They're not random shocks. They're carefully orchestrated moves in a high-stakes global reset. The mainstream won't talk about it, but Morgan has been connecting the dots for years. And now, with silver still flying under the radar and the monetary system on life support, the pieces are finally falling into place. Could this be the moment silver breaks free from suppression and rockets to $500 an ounce? You're about to see why that number isn't speculation. It's the logical outcome of everything that's been building behind the scenes. Stay with me, because once you understand how deep the plan runs, you'll never look at your money the same way again.
Absolutely. So first I want to build, put on my engineering hat for a moment and build the foundation. So one of the best foundations I think ever made was by the first movie Thrive by Foster Gamble. And he does a pyramid of power. And in the pyramid of power, what you see is that, living life forms like the animals and the plants, trees, and all that are underneath the pyramid. And we, the people, are there. And the bottom of the pyramid is government. And then above government, you start to have corporations. So corporations are superior to the government in the chain of power. And then above the corporations, you have commercial banks. And then from commercial banks, you go to the money center banks. And the money center banks, you eventually get to the BIS, the Bank of International Settlements. And now you've moved pretty far up the pyramid. And then you get to the all-seeing eye, and you can argue, well, is it the Jesuits? Is it a foreign life form? I won't go there because I don't know. I've got ideas. So the Bankers Bank is called the Bank of International Settlements. So I did my speech in New Orleans at the 50th anniversary gold show. I talked about the monetary system from where it would emanate from. And it's not from the Federal Reserve. It's from the Bank of International Settlements. And so I went basically using almost everything off of their website. So it could be verified that they basically want a cashless society based on a digital currency of some type that would clear through, and you can look this up, ISO 222. And this is where I have a bit of a pushback with my friend Andy Schechtman, and I'm not against Andy, but I think, in my opinion, studied opinion, Andy makes a pretty good case about the BRICS being like a counterweight to the current system. And in a way they are. But when you get to the way the world really works, or at least how I viewed it and studied for years, it all goes through the elite banking system. And it all clears through the same thing. So the BRICS have to clear through ISO 222, and so does any other digital currency or any other final payment method, be it a SWIFT system, the Chinese system, digital currency, or what have you. So that, to me, spells it out. I like to go to, follow the money, you follow it all the way up. That's where it emanates from. So that's it in a nutshell. You can go to their website. I think Brian put my speech up for public access. I don't have it memorized to go through it all, but, we want the bottom line. That's the bottom line. They're still in control. And I think on the Fed, I know we want to talk about that more, and people think, that...
According to David Morgan, the chaos we're seeing in the banking sector isn't a bug in the system. It's a feature. He argues that the string of collapses and forced mergers isn't a sign of failure, but part of a carefully crafted plan to consolidate power. Think about it. When regional banks fail or are deemed undercapitalized, what happens? They get absorbed into bigger institutions, entities that are easier to monitor and control. This isn't about protecting depositors or stabilizing the economy. It's about control. Fewer banks mean fewer moving parts for the central authorities to manage. That's the goal. Morgan says this is being orchestrated by a central authority with its fingers in nearly every financial institution, the Federal Reserve System. And most people don't even realize that almost all banks are member banks of the Fed, meaning they're already within the circle of influence. But this circle is shrinking, not expanding, and that should set off alarm bells. Every time a mid-sized institution disappears into a megabank, it's another move toward centralized dominance. This isn't a free market correcting itself. It's a chessboard being cleared for checkmate.
Some people still think that it's part of the U.S. government. And, I have to go to G. Edward Griffin and the Creature from Jekyll Island, and he now states, or has for a long time, that it's quasi-government. It is a private corporation, but the way it's been modified over the years is that the member banks are part of the Fed. So they are, corporations that are, let's say, their articles of incorporation come from the state of Delaware for the most part, or New York, or what have you. So it's a very complex system, but it's a hierarchy system that's a top-down system. And I think I want to emphasize that people think that the government has all this power, that Mr. So-and-so or Mr. whomever is going to make things great and are going to do all this, and they attribute really more power to them than they actually have or deserve, because the lobbyists in Washington District of Criminals are extremely efficient at getting the laws in their direction to do what they want, and the let's say the bought and paid for Congress critters and senators do what they are paid to do. And that comes through the corporate class. And nothing happens in a corporation unless you can be heavily involved in the credit system, and that comes through the banking class. So let's just get this straight once and for all. Who's really running things is not the government. They're taking orders from corporations for the most part, and corporations are taking orders from the banks for the most part. So, I'm getting a little more gnarly in my older age because, I don't see I have a lot of time left. It's not me personally what my lifespan is. We're near the hour of midnight right now. And if we don't wake up enough people that will say, I'm not complying, just say no, easier said than done. We may be going down that road to serfdom that nobody really wants. I mean, it might sound good that you get free everything. But remember, if you want free healthcare and free dental and the bed that you're guaranteed to sleep in and free entertainment, you can have that anytime you want. It's called jail.
To understand who's really pulling the strings, David Morgan urges us to climb the so-called pyramid of power, a hierarchy where money, not government, reigns supreme. At the very base of this structure are the people, followed by local governments. But then things get interesting. Above government sit corporations, and above corporations, banks. Specifically, commercial banks, which in turn answer to even more powerful money center banks. And at the peak of this pyramid lies the Bank for International Settlements, the BIS, the true bank of central banks. This is where global monetary policy really takes shape, not in Washington, not in London, but in Basel, Switzerland, behind the impenetrable walls of the BIS. Morgan claims this institution isn't just a quiet financial coordinator. It's the architect of the next financial era. Through it, all central banks coordinate. And once you realize this, the illusion of democratic financial governance begins to fall apart. Politicians become middlemen, and central bankers become enforcers, for a plan most citizens don't even know exists.
Yeah, it's structured that way. And again, it's sort of hidden, like you say, unless you push back. Well, we're just following orders.
If you want to know where the next monetary system is being designed,
us, and you say, well,
it's not
what
a
are you guys
conspiracy
doing?
theory.
Oh, we're just following orders from
It's
the
public
next level
record.
above us. I
You
did
just
leave
have
out
to
a
know where to
critical part of
look
the speech.
and what it really means.
And that is how much the new artificial intelligence will be engaged in the monetary system. And this will not only be in the monetary system, will be pervasive throughout our lives. So if you do something that isn't copacetic with your financial wherewithal, the AI might pick that up. And because of that impropriety, you will be doxxed of your, some money. You might be blocked from a transaction. And then your carbon footprint will fit into this as well, that, you drove too many times to grandma's this month, therefore your fuel allotment is going to be cut by, 20%. You ate too much, whatever. And, it's just going to go on and on. So when you give this power control, and then again, to emphasize the AI, this is an algorithm that will not have any compassion involved. So, a judge has the ability as a human being to look at the letter of the law, the spirit of the law, and maybe there's something about the particular case-by-case basis that the judge maybe is a bit more lenient because it really deserves that because of insinuating circumstances or whatever. AI doesn't have that ability. AI is going to say, you were going 23 miles per hour over, therefore the fine is this or whatever, let alone you were, going faster so you didn't hit the buffalo or something. I don't know, but you get the idea. And this will work its way through everything. It'll be a lot less, the idea of a RoboCop out there at some point in time is closer than most people think. So I wanted to fit that in because that was part of the speech. And I gave some, examples. So this one I just dreamed up wasn't maybe the best, but you get the idea. And this is frightening because there isn't any recourse. I'm not sure that you'll even have the ability to go through, let's say, a process where you could push back and get a hearing on the case or whatever. If the AI decides it this way, what do you do? Go to a higher AI? I don't know. But it's frightening when you think about it. And that's my last and final point before I give it back. And that is, we're not moving into a communist system. We're moving into a technocracy. And a technocracy really removes a lot of the political class. A lot of the political class at that bottom of the pyramid, remember, anything that's that low is kind of more expendable. The corporate class is above the governing class. Well, the governing class could get down to fewer people and more AI, more computers, more RoboCops. They are not, that class isn't needed as much as it is in today's world. So lots of things go into the very, very quickly changing world with, what's going on with Doge and everything else we see. But at the heart of it, it's control. And there's nothing that controls a human being more in our current system than the monetary system.
The BIS isn't just sitting at the top of the monetary food chain. It's actively building a new system from the ground up, and it's not based on cash. David Morgan points to their own documentation showing that the future will revolve around a centralized, cashless society powered by digital currencies. But these aren't your typical cryptocurrencies. These are centrally controlled digital assets, engineered to plug into a global infrastructure called ISO 222. Every major currency system, from SWIFT to China's digital yuan and even BRICS alternatives, will be forced to comply. So while it may look like new monetary alliances are emerging as competition to the dollar, Morgan argues they're all ultimately feeding into the same funnel. The key here is that ISO 222 isn't just a format, it's a global protocol. Once this is fully implemented, every financial transaction will pass through a centralized grid, giving the elite unprecedented visibility and control. In other words, it won't matter which team you think your country is on. The architecture has already been built. Morgan challenges the idea that we're heading toward financial multipolarity. He believes we're walking straight into a digital panopticon, and most people are sleepwalking through the transition.
Well, there's no question that the Fed's real purpose is to save the banking system. And to save the banking system, they'll do whatever they have to. I mean, if you go back to the financial crisis of 2008, the Fed gave out a lot of funds to European banks that were having issues. And one of the congressman from Florida, I forget his name, but he's really putting Bernanke, he's putting one of the Fed members on the hot seat and asking him how much, money was given, and he refused to answer. the amount. He didn't remember the amount. Didn't matter the amount. They're not answerable to Congress. They're not answerable to anybody. They're above. They are a separate private corporation. As they're now their mandate, I have to laugh because one of the first publications I did on the internet so many years ago, 25 or thereabouts, I talked about their mandate to keep stability in the monetary system. And at that time, I said that the $1913, remember this 25 years ago or thereabouts, that the $1913 worth 3 cents. Great job, gentlemen, because their mandate was to keep a stable dollar. Then a $1913 would be the same exact value in 2000 than it is in 1913. And yet here it was, worth 3% of what it was originally. I mean, if you do a 10-point quiz, you're doing a spelling bee and you're a third grader and you bring your paper home to your parents, it says 3 out of 100. I mean, you would consider that to be a miserable failure. And yet here we are saying, the dollar's stronger than everybody else. Well, relative, all things being relative.
Just before we get going, we just launched the official Silver News Daily Telegram. To kick things off, we're running a 10-ounce silver giveaway. Yes, real physical silver, not a voucher, not digital credits, actual bullion. This Telegram will be our new home for real-time silver discussions, market insights, collection picks, and everything precious metals. It's where the community truly comes alive. Here's how to enter the 10-ounce silver giveaway. Be subscribed to Silver News Daily on YouTube. Turn on the notification bell. Comment 10-ounce giveaway on 3 separate videos. Be an active member of the Telegram group and say hi. Once we hit 500 active Telegram members, we'll pick one lucky winner to receive 10 ounces of silver shipped directly to you. So get in early, stay active. If digital currency is the new cage, then artificial intelligence is the lock. And David Morgan warns it's already snapping shut. He reveals that AI won't just process transactions in this new system, it will enforce the rules, automatically, impersonally, without debate. Imagine a world where your financial behavior is constantly monitored, scored, and judged by a machine. Did you spend too much on gas this month? Your carbon allowance gets cut. Booked one too many flights? Access denied. Bought too much meat? Visited grandma too often or supported the wrong cause? The algorithm notices and reacts. This isn't a hypothetical. The BIS and related institutions are already working on integrating behavioral data into financial frameworks. The result is chilling. Money becomes programmable, conditional, and weaponized. You won't need a court, a cop, or a bureaucrat. An invisible AI will decide instantly what you can and cannot do. Morgan emphasizes that once this system is in place, there's no appealing to a judge or pleading with a banker. The machine will rule, and the rules will be set by the elite few who control the data pipelines. It's the ultimate form of silent tyranny. No stormtroopers, just a friendly app that tells you transaction declined.
You cut that into half, and then you cut that in half again, your management system is a lot more clear. I mean, if you have one central authority, which basically do with the Federal Reserve System, and almost all banks are member banks, and they say, well, we don't need these banks, or these banks have failed or they're not capitalizing enough, and they merge, 2 medium-sized banks and a bigger bank. It's all about control. It's about control of the money. And if you have fewer banks to control, it's easier. And so that really is part of the goal rather than, it's a failure. No, it's actually part of the plan. And then, of course, you move into what we talked about earlier into making it eventually a one world currency. Now, the BIS doesn't really say that in their documentation, but they imply that all currencies will clear through this one system. And then you can just imagine for less friction or whatever, rather than have different currencies, why not just have one world currency? Now, that's my take on what they wrote. And I think that part of what's going on right now is to get the system in such a point where, as so many of your guests and myself included have used the overused word reset, but the idea being that the system is failing. Most people know it's failing. Mathematically, it has to fail. But failure means what? The bankers' minds, as long as they keep control of the monetary system, and out of the ashes comes the phoenix, and we go from, paper dollars into a already digital system, but it's revamped to where there is no currency. You have a universal basic income. All the money at source is traced and taxed at point of sale. No IRS necessary. Everything that you buy is already taxed at point of sale. And there would be, let's say, a luxury tax if you're buying an automobile that was less efficient than the standard set out by, let's say, the treaty from the United Nations. Let's get down to business here. It's not going to be a mandate from a given state that says we want this kind of mileage. They might say it, but it's going to be superseded by the federal government. It's going to be superseded by some treaty that's going to go to the UN. It's quite obvious if you look at this stuff carefully, and I do, but not to the extent that some of my friends do, because I focus more on the financial side and you can't know everything. But there are others that, go to the UN meetings. I'm losing his name. You can write something for the New American or Alex Newman. And that guy is like on it. And he knows a lot more about that than I, but I listen to him quite frequently. And this is the way it really works. But people are thinking, well, this certain person that's on the red team is going to fix things. It's not the way it really works. It's sort of an illusion. And I'm not anti anyone. I'm pro freedom. That's who I am. My bad day, I was asked a long time ago, I'm digressing a moment, I'll get it back. But, it was a Corlin's economics report. And Al loved to get into politics, and I just dislike it. And so he, of course, put me on the spot on the show. It's a live show. I can't back out. And he says, all right, Morgan, what do you think? What do you want? Who do you want in there? And I say, you know what I want? I don't care what color they are. I don't care what their background is. I want one thing and one thing only. I want every one of them to do what they say they're going to do. And that's when they swear the oath of office. I want them to uphold that oath. That's what I want. Al was lost for words for about a minute or two.
David Morgan doesn't stop at financial control. He takes it one step further, warning that what we're really witnessing is the erasure of national sovereignty. Local, state, and even federal governments are being reduced to little more than customer service reps for global institutions. When draconian policies are enforced, like lockdowns, mandates, or economic restrictions, leaders point fingers upward. We're just following national guidelines, they say. But when you trace those guidelines upstream, they lead to the same handful of organizations: the BIS, the IMF, the World Economic Forum, the WHO. These unelected entities are crafting global rules, and elected governments are simply executing them. That's the shift Morgan wants people to see. We've moved from representative democracy to regulatory theater, where decisions are made behind closed doors and rubber-stamped by politicians pretending to be in charge. Worse still, these global actors operate in complete opacity. You can't vote them out. You can't protest outside their doors. And you certainly can't audit their intentions. Morgan's message is clear. If we keep complying with this top-down structure, we're not just losing our money. We're surrendering our agency, our autonomy, and our very sense of citizenship. The system being built isn't just global, it's unaccountable.
Well, I will. I want to tell you a quick story. First of all, I'm going to be speaking at the Money Show in Las Vegas this year in July. And I was at the Money Show several years ago, and one of the top guys of the certified financial planners, I call it association, I don't know the exact term, was there. And so I spoke with him, off the record, walking down the hall about the Ibbotson study, the Harvard study, the CPM study, and why gold is a part of a balanced portfolio and absolutely critical for all weather conditions, all economic, financial conditions. And, it's an adult conversation. And I basically said, why are, all the certified financial planners never, ever mention gold? And that these studies prove that you need it for a balanced portfolio. And he was squirming, but, basically gave a similar answer to what you just said. And then I said, well, what happens if my, ilk is correct? And there is a huge financial correction or a big crash in the market, and people wake up to the fact that they should have been protected by a 15% weighting in gold, and the lawsuits start coming. And I did it deliberately. Now, this was a one-on-one conversation. I wasn't trying to bully him. I was just trying to, push him, and he just basically shrugged it off. I forget his exact comment. He turned his back on me and walked away. But, my idea was to enlighten the CFAs, the certified financial analysts, certified financial planners, to put it. Now, your question goes deeper than that. And it comes into legal tender laws, court cases that have been basically, in my opinion, very studied opinion, basically did not obey the law. And, when the first case came out that the Legal Tender Act, that paper is the fundamental foundation, when it clearly says in the Constitution, which is the law of the land, it's above everything. It's not color of law. It's not a mandate. It's not an opinion. It is. It doesn't really need to be questioned. So the court gooned it. But who's running the courts? Well, I don't know. But you might use some logic here and say, well, maybe the bankers had some influence in how that ruling took place. And once a precedent is set, and this is an unfortunate part about jurisprudence in our country, is once a precedent is set, it kind of like leans from that point forward into any other cases. Well, the precedent was set that a piece of paper is legal tender and it has to be accepted. I'm going to digress one more because it's one of my favorite, gotchas. I've often thought when I get my, property tax bill to call up the county assessor and say, I'm really confused. I am very, very sorry. I think I've been frauding you for the last 10 years. Why? Well, I've been paying my property taxes with this script from a private entity. And it says right here that states only accept gold and silver in the payment of debt. And as far as I understand, my property tax is a debt. Is that correct? Well, yeah. Well, I haven't been paying you with gold and silver. Am I in trouble? Am I going to go to jail? Now, obviously, I'm being a bit facetious here, but
one of the most deeply misunderstood players in this grand reset is the Federal Reserve. And David Morgan wastes no time cutting through the fog. He argues that despite public perception, the Fed is not a government agency. It's a private corporation. Yes, it was established by Congress, but it operates independently, owned by its member banks and structured to serve their interests, not the people's. Morgan draws from the research of G. Edward Griffin, author of The Creature from Jekyll Island, to explain how the Fed has evolved into a quasi-government entity, one with the legal power of the state, but the profit motive of a corporation. This is not just an academic distinction. It means that monetary policy, including interest rates, money printing, and emergency bailouts, is being dictated by an institution that is unelected, unaudited, and fundamentally unaccountable. And who owns the member banks that own the Fed? Other giant financial institutions. It's a recursive loop of private control wrapped in the illusion of public service. Morgan emphasizes that as long as the Fed remains insulated from democratic oversight, it will continue acting as an enforcement arm for the elite banking class, serving up new systems of control while the average citizen is left clinging to collapsing currency and eroding rights.
if you go to the letter of the law, and the law was upheld instead of twisted, excuse me, then I think we'd have a different, we'd be talking a different subject today. But unfortunately, the further it gets corrupt, and this is something that, is in the film, The Four Horsemen, and, and other places, and most of your guests, this is a cyclical thing. This is not like, it's, from 1964 or 5 on when the silver, was out of the system. It's, if you go to the book by Bastiat, The Law, and it's a very thin book, but it's a very powerful book about how the ruling class basically manipulates the law to get things set up to where they have an advantage over the regular people. And I want to go one more place, and that's on, silver as money. And if you look at silver as money, you don't have to go that far back in history where $1 a day was an average wage. So $1 which is 371.2 fine grains and 999 fine silver, is not 1 ounce of silver. But if you get a silver eagle, it is 1 ounce and it will say $1 on it, which proves the Treasury doesn't know the weight of a dollar. A dollar at law is about 3/4 of an ounce. But for simplicity purposes, I'm going to call it 1 ounce. But I just don't want people to know, David's a silver guru and he doesn't know what he's talking about. So if you go to $1 a day, and that was an average wage. If you go today and you Google, and I was really surprised at this, Dunnigan, but the average wage, believe it or not, according to Google, is like $25 an hour, which sounds high in an 8-hour day. So that's $200 for an average person per day. So that would mean that 1 ounce or that 3/4 of an ounce would be worth $200. And I think that's about the right price in order to use it as money again. Because silver is so undervalued. It's been pushed down and kept down for so long, and it's worth so much more. It has to be revalued to use it as money. But you could look at it and flip to the other side of the coin and say, wait a minute, I'm getting paid 8 times more than I should if I take my value in silver. And if it corrects even halfway or a third of the way, I'll have, recognizable gain. But it's an easier way to look at, what should silver be priced at? If you want to price it as far as a day's wage, that's why. Now, if you go to Chris Dwayne, Silver Shield guy, he'll tell you that in Roman times, 1/10 of an ounce of silver is what a soldier was paid. So you could take that number and you could factor it by 10. I think more recent history is more important than ancient history. That's the way all the algorithms are set up. You want to know what a stock's performance was last, 3 days ago, a week ago, a month ago, was weighted far more in the algorithm than what the stock did 2 years ago. But nonetheless, I wanted to bring that forth.
The illusion of fiat money is crumbling. And David Morgan wants everyone to understand just how fragile this system really is. Most people assume that the dollar, and by extension, all fiat currencies, has some kind of intrinsic value, that it's backed by a robust, lawful foundation. But Morgan tears that notion apart. The truth is, today's monetary system isn't grounded in the Constitution. It isn't based on tangible assets. And it isn't even built to last. It's based on trust. And that trust is evaporating. Fiat currencies are created out of thin air, backed by nothing but promises, and sustained by confidence that's now being tested by inflation, debt saturation, and geopolitical instability. Every time the Fed prints money or cuts rates to zero, it's like injecting steroids into a dying patient. It looks strong until it suddenly collapses. Morgan points to historical examples where fiat systems have failed. Weimar Germany, Zimbabwe, Venezuela. In each case, the end came not slowly, but suddenly. The tipping point is always the same, when the public realizes that their paper wealth is just that, paper. He warns that we are dangerously close to that point today, and when it happens, there will be no time to reposition. The value of money can vanish overnight, and those still holding fiat will be left with nothing but regret.
Absolutely. I mean, if you go to first principles and you look at it from the aspect of the same rules, laws, and accountability for everyone. So any American was treated equally. When I say created equal, it isn't that we're created equal in our ability to carry a football or to run a race. It's under the law. We're all created equal. So no one is above anyone else. So let's say a pharmaceutical company could not be exempted. That's changing the rules. So that's the first principles, which have been broken. And then on the sound money, I mean, it comes back to fairness to everyone involved and the inability to basically change the value over the long term. I mean, it can fluctuate. And the worst thing about the honest money system was pegging silver to gold at a fixed ratio. The best thing you can do is to let them float. And then silver could be exchanged for gold and vice versa at different rates as the market determined. And that would keep a balance in the system rather than getting a push into one or the other, an arbitrage situation. But the first principles are that same rules, laws, and accountability for everyone. If everyone's accountable for the same monetary unit, and it does take work for it to be manufactured. I mean, to come up out of the ground, to be purified, to refine it, and to press it into a coin. Then you have something of value. And if you look at it from a gold-silver aspect, which obviously I have many times, gold really serves a purpose as money or jewelry. But silver now, in the technological age, has a absolute essential quality that all of the metals don't have to the level that silver has. It's the best conductor of electricity. It's the best conductor of heat. Its acoustical properties are superior to most metals. And these properties are essential in high-tech society. So you couldn't have today's world without silver. You could have today's world without gold. So there's something to this.
In a world where the very concept of money is being redefined, David Morgan believes silver is not just relevant. It's essential. He argues that silver is the antidote to fiat's poison, a tangible, immutable asset that has outlasted every failed currency in history. Unlike digital credits or printed bills, silver holds real intrinsic value. It doesn't rely on trust, doesn't need an institution to validate it, and cannot be inflated by the whims of central banks. But this time, Morgan says, silver's role is even bigger than before. Not only is it a historic store of value, it's also a critical industrial metal, woven into the future of energy, technology, and infrastructure. From solar panels and electric vehicles to 5G networks and medical tech, silver is being consumed at record rates. Yet production is struggling to keep up. For 4 consecutive years, the world has been running a physical silver deficit. At the same time, demand from both industrial sectors and private investors is surging. This isn't a speculative bubble. It's a structural imbalance. And when fiat currencies start to falter, Morgan says the rush to silver won't just be about returns, it'll be about survival. When the dust settles, only assets with real utility and real scarcity will matter. Silver checks both boxes, and then some.
Silver equation that maybe the bankers saw a long time ago, that this must be demonetized because we need it for industry, and therefore we need to make sure that we manage it in a way that's sufficient to our needs. Remember, going up the ladder, corporations are above the political scene. Well, let's get the politicians to make it the way we want it, take it out of the monetary system. We need it for industry. We're a big corporation, and we rely on silver to become necessary for our bottom line, and we want a huge profit. So let's keep that element on the periodic table out of the monetary sphere and into the industrial use only. And there are people in our group, in our peer group, that will, argue that silver isn't money. Economically, silver is not money. But at law, I still could, go into court and win the case that silver's money. I mean, I could go in with silver dollars and be stupid to do it. But I could go into Walmart with silver dollars and buy something. I'd have to argue maybe with the manager, but they'd have to accept it if they knew what the hell they're doing. They might push back and say, we can't accept it. So you won't take money, but you'll take this green stuff by a private corp, huh? Oh, yeah. Oh, of course we will. It's really sad. It's sad that not enough of us have stood up. Going back to the medical thing, this is where it really gets tough for freedom not being free. And that is where you do have a choice, but not much of one. You can stand up and say, no, I'm not going to do it, and lose your job. I happen to have a good friend in Canada that did that. And he's never got back to the same job he had before. And, to go through the court system and try to rectify a wrong, it may happen, it may not. But, it's very difficult. It's easy to say, oh, I'll just say no or no. And you might know better. I don't want it, but if I don't do it, I can't feed my family. I mean, this is a big fear that people have, and it's a justified one. Anyway, I digress. I just wanted to make that point because it's going to take sacrifice if we are going to make this thing turn around. It's not going to be like, you just check a ballot box and everything's going to get better. Grow up. Cavalry is not coming to our rescue.
David Morgan isn't making wild guesses when he talks about $500 silver. He's connecting the dots between hard economic data, historical precedent, and the inescapable math of collapse. When fiat systems fail, real assets don't just appreciate, they surge. And silver, with its dual identity as both an industrial necessity and a monetary refuge, becomes a magnet for capital-fleeing dying currencies. Morgan points to the inflation-adjusted high from 1980, nearly $150 an ounce in today's terms, as just a starting point. He believes that when the coming supply shock meets an explosion of demand, silver won't just test those levels, it will obliterate them. It's not just about inflation anymore. It's about systemic repricing. He warns that investors and institutions alike will scramble to secure silver, not just in ETFs or paper markets, but in physical form. And as we've already seen in smaller surges, once physical inventory dries up, premiums explode and prices go vertical. The banking elite may try to suppress that move, but even they can't hold back a tidal wave. The reality is, once the public understands that their dollars are disintegrating, the flight into hard assets will become a stampede. And silver, long ignored and undervalued, will finally take center stage, with a price tag that could blow past $500 as easily as it once did $50.
First of all, I was taught by a pretty well-known in the local area legal authority, and he said, taught me to choose your battles. My battle is sound money. I'm not Alex Newman. I don't pretend to be. I'm grateful that I have him as a friend, and I can rely on all the work he's done and get kind of a good briefing from him whenever. But my battle so I think if that's my battle, then every opportunity that arises, I should take advantage of it. So Starbucks won't take cash. So I will, as an example, I don't know if it does or it doesn't, but if you're in a situation like that, then you don't have to yell, but you might have 3 or 4 people lying behind you. And you say, your coffee's, $5. So you give them a $5 bill and, we can't take cash. And then you just calmly pick it up and say, well, this does say for all debts, public and private, if you won't accept it, does that mean I get this coffee for free? You just engage it. Well, no, you have to use a credit card. Well, I don't qualify for credit. I was bankrupt last year and I can't get credit for another year, but I want this cup of coffee and I'm willing to pay for it. And you hand it over to them. Well, I can't do it. Well, can I talk to the manager? So now you're backing up their business. Everybody behind you is hearing it. You're not causing a scene. You're asking questions. The best way to put the wheelbarrows put the rocks into their wheelbarrow is to ask questions. Don't tell them a damn thing. Just ask them questions like, well, why isn't this accepted? It says on there it's supposed to be. Well, we don't accept cash. Yeah, the clerk told me that. But my question is, why don't you accept cash when it's supposed to be payable to anybody? All debts. I mean, this is part of the all, isn't it? Well, I don't know why I'm just told that. Well, I don't have credit, so what are we going to do? What else is possible? That's a really good one. What else is possible? Now they have to think. You put them on the spot. There's 4 guys behind you. 2 more people have come in. You're at the airport. Let me pay for your coffee or what? Who knows what's going to happen? But now, so you have at least planted a seed in maybe 3 or 4 people, or maybe somebody walking by stopped it. What's going on over there? And so I would say, if your battle is, you pick your battle, mine is sound money, then any opportunity that arises, you take advantage of it. And that's a good way to do it. I mean, you can get up. So what do? I mean, they've already made the coffee. Are they going to dump it down the sink? Maybe. Are they going to give it to somebody walking by? I don't know. Is the manager going to drink it? I don't know. But these are things that you can do. And they're opportunities to educate the public in the real world that most people are in. I don't know why I want to say this, but I was in that airport, wanted a coffee. I'd been 8-hour, back-to-back flights. And all I wanted was a quick pick-me-up. And was in Sweden. And honest to God, they should only take my card. Well, I gave my card. Well, it was declined because sometimes, international or whatever. So I had their euro.
The writing's on the wall. This isn't just another market cycle. It's the final act of a system in decay. David Morgan's $500 silver call isn't a headline grab. It's a warning shot. The banking elite are resetting the financial world on their terms, and the average person is being locked out one layer at a time through digital currencies, centralized control, and algorithmic compliance. But silver offers a rare escape route, a tangible lifeline in a world drifting towards synthetic wealth and total surveillance. If you're watching this, you've already taken the first step, awareness. But the real question is, what will you do with that awareness? Silver won't wait for headlines. When the panic begins, it will be too late to buy at today's prices. So if you're ready to take control of your financial future, don't sit on the sidelines. And if you found this discussion valuable, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. This is not financial advice. Always consult a qualified professional before making any investment decisions.